Thank you, Deputy Speaker. It's always a privilege to talk about aged care in the chamber and our older Australians and the care that they are given. And of course I have many providers in my electorate at Moncrieff on the Gold Coast, and I do enjoy regularly visiting those residential care homes, and I always look forward to chatting with the elderly residents about their concerns, and I look forward to doing that next week, where I'll be visiting a few in the Nerang area of my electorate. And whilst we're talking about aged care, it's also about in-home care that we're discussing. But I just would like to say hello to those residents across Moncrieff in all of the aged care facilities, and those at homesteads in Nerang particularly, and of course Earl Haven, which has some assisted living units there, and I'll be visiting there next week with the state candidate for Gaven, Bianca Stone, who is running for that seat at the state election, and she's an incredible person with a great history and will be a remarkable MP, I'm sure, in the next Queensland Parliament. So shout out to all of those, and I look forward to meeting you again next week. But we can all recognise the importance, of course, of a strong, dignified and world-class aged care system that supports all older Australians now and into the future. And when I think about the baby boomer generation, or when I even think about my grandparents, my grandmother was in an aged care home in Adelaide for some years, and I visited her a number of times, and the care that she received from the workers in that environment who cared so deeply about her in her last years. And now, of course, my own family, my father's getting to that age, and my aunts and uncles are getting to that age where they might be looking at getting some in-home care assistance, or certainly lean on the services and providers that are around the country. So this is an important area that, of course, needs reform, and the Coalition has been working closely to try to improve this bill. But with more than half of aged care homes across the country currently operating at a loss, an ageing population and a growing desire to age at home, there is definitely a need for that sector reform that I talked about, because we need a system that provides dignity and clarity for older Australians. And this legislation delivers on the first recommendation of the Royal Commission appointed by the Coalition to implement a new right-based aged care Act. And in response to the Royal Commission, I'll note, Deputy Speaker, that the former Coalition government provided more than $18 billion in funding to support the immediate needs of the sector. And I recall Minister Hunt at the time, who was the minister, and the fantastic job that he did with his 4 key pillars for the aged care sector reform, and of course the funding that went along with that. And I congratulate him on his previous work that he's done. And I also congratulate Senator Ruston, who has done so much work on this particular bill that's before the House, in working with the government to make it a much better bill. And while it's not perfect, it's much better than it was. The Coalition provided a clear offer to work with the government on sensible aged care policies, because we need a system that's strong and sustainable to support future generations. And that's probably my generation. I see a member for Bass is there, our generation, who's probably next after our parents, of course. And so this, of course, is something that's so important to a large proportion of our population and their families. And I just want to be clear about this package, because these are Labor's reforms, and this has not been co-designed by the Coalition. And so whilst we have been able to make some changes, we're still not 100% on Labor's package, but the Coalition has worked tirelessly to ensure that the government's reforms are fairer, particularly for Australians who have worked hard all their lives to save for their retirement. And of course, all of our families have worked very hard throughout their lives and paid their taxes, and then in their twilight years they must be looked after. I want to commend the work again of my colleague Senator Ruston for her efforts and negotiating on this bill and making sure that we were able to fight for the inclusion of grandfathering arrangements to ensure that every Australian who's already commenced their journey of ageing. Well, all of us have commenced that, haven't we, Deputy Speaker? Nobody's getting any younger day by day, and so it's only a matter of time before a larger proportion of the population have to lean on the aged care sector for that support and help. But we've already commenced, for those Australians who have already commenced their journey of ageing within the Commonwealth system, will not be impacted by these changes. And I think that's a really important point, to make sure that there is a grandfathering applied to this, so that there is certainty across the sector moving forward. So that means that older Australians who are currently in the system, including those on home care wait list, will not pay 1 cent more for their aged care journey. So that delivers certainty where there was none before with this package. A fairer deal for hard-working Australians ensured the inclusion of a much lower taper rate to ensure equitable contributions for Australians who've worked hard all their lives to save for their retirement, and an assurance that the federal government will remain the majority funder of aged care, not the consumer. And I think that's also a very important point. As I said, I've watched my parents work their whole lives and pay their taxes, and they should be looked after when they're on the pension, particularly looked after well, and that's so very important that that assurance is there as our population ages. Because for older Australians, as I said, who have paid their taxes and done the work, many of them don't have the benefit of superannuation either, and I think that's really important to highlight. And so they don't have that nest egg to lean on in retirement, or when they need to go into a home where they have that support and assistance, or indeed where they need in-home care. So that's certainty for families who've got loved ones in care for many years, as well as the inclusion of a time-limited cap for residential aged care to ensure that older Australians and their families will only be required to contribute to care costs for 4 years. The government's original proposal saw no cap on home care and a $184,000 cap on residential aged care only. And so we gained the concession that no older Australian will ever pay more than $130,000 for home care and the non-clinical care in residential care combined. So these were concessions that Senator Anne Ruston and the Coalition were able to negotiate for a better deal for our older Australians. We secured $300 million in additional capital funding through the Aged Care Capital Assistance Program for regional, rural and remote aged care providers to upgrade their facilities, along with additional care funding for regional, rural and remote aged care home, because it's unsurprising that the Labor government included no targeted support for rural, regional and remote aged care homes in its initial proposal, because regional and remote and rural Australia is not on the government's mind. The government is chasing the city vote, not the regional vote, and that's why it wasn't included in this package, because the Labor government doesn't care about regional Australians. It's the LNP, the Liberal National Parties, who care deeply about regional Australia, and so that is why we delivered that in this package. We strongly push for the removal of criminal penalties from the bill, following serious concerns that their inclusion would force the exit of highly capable staff from the sector, in fear of being criminally punished to a level not seen in any other industry. You should not be going to work in fear of a criminal penalty unless you have committed a criminal act, of course. And so we've removed that, managed to remove that from the government's package of bills here. The government wanted aged care workers and even volunteers to be criminally liable under the new Act. So we fought hard for the changes to make sure that Australians who have worked hard all their lives to save for their retirement are dealt a much fairer deal. The Coalition strongly believes the government needs to be talking with old Australians, speaking with the stakeholders, their families, speaking with the sector, bringing them to the table and taking them on the journey of aged care reform, because they are very substantial reforms to the sector. They've been excluded from this conversation for far too long, and that's why we fought for an open and transparent Senate committee inquiry, which will, of course, bring out all the questions and bring the stakeholders to the table to ask the questions that they would like of the government for what they are doing in terms of reforms across the sector and what implications that has for aged care facilities, for their residents, for their workers and for their families as well. So we strongly encourage anyone to participate in this inquiry process to make sure that your views are heard, to make sure that the government listens to your views, and this is the opportunity during the Senate inquiry to do that. We look forward to now having this open conversation with older Australians and the aged care sector about the government's proposed reforms through that Senate inquiry process, and we welcome the views of Australians to put them forward, asking the government, of course, many, many questions about the future of aged care in this country. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.